Today I'm going to talk about loneliness. It's not really a topic that is discussed a lot. A lot of people might feel it, but it's a little, awkward maybe to talk about it with someone. Um, so, what exactly is loneliness? It's basically when we feel separate from ourselves and others. And it can be brought up by a lot of life situations. For example, when a relationship ends, or when we move away to a new place where we don't know anyone, or when we don't feel appreciated or understood by those around us. It can be at work or at home, in every relationship. So, whatever the trigger, loneliness is basically the, the feeling that we would love companionship and community. And even though it feels uncomfortable to be lonely, it can actually remind us of our need for human connection and then motivate us to seek it out. What's the difference between loneliness and being alone? I mean, that's a really good question, isn't it? So, feeling lonely is more than being close to other people. Is It's when we could feel lonely when we're physically alone, but it can also happen when we're around other people and feel unappreciated or misunderstood. So this makes loneliness different from just being alone. So loneliness versus being alone means loneliness is more like a feeling or a perception. It's very subjective and it's not really measurable since it's like an inner experience. Everyone might feel lonely in a different scenario. But being alone is literally an external condition or it's reality. For alone at home, then we're alone. It's very objective and it is measurable by looking at number and frequency of social contact. So we can measure that. Like if I'm going to want a friend, then it's more likely that I can feel lonely if I have 10 friends that are living close by. But another thing that we also need to consider is that even though people might not be physically alone, they might still feel lonely, and then others are both lonely and alone. So there's a few things to consider in being lonely or alone. So loneliness tends to feel uncomfortable, so it feels like empty, and it could also sort of trigger anxiety. It feels like we're being cut off from others, and that sort of puts our nervous system into an alarm state. So generally, we're hardwired for connection. We crave it, and so we interpret a lack of connection as a threat. So when anxiety hits, then we could also ruminate and have intrusive thoughts, which then tends to take the form of self blame. It's my fault I'm lonely. Or, sort of like looking at the future, I'll always be lonely, or I'll never find someone who likes me. So, unless we challenge this kind of thinking, these thoughts can lead us to sadness and sometimes substance abuse or even depression. And that also contributes to the burden of loneliness. So, when that happens, people withdraw, which usually makes the loneliness even worse. Another point in this is shame. It's kind of like, you know, related to loneliness. When we feel shame, we might feel that loneliness is embarrassing or humiliating, something we shouldn't be feeling. Even if this isn't true, it's easy to believe when we're like feeling lonely. So, what are the causes and the contributing factors to loneliness? There are a couple of things that sort of trigger or amplify loneliness. The first one would be early family experiences. So, our childhood experiences can predispose us to feeling lonely as adults. Because the first relationship we know is that with our caregivers, our parents. If this relationship was loving, reliable, and they were responsive, we're more likely to trust and commit to relationships as adults. So this is known as secure attachment. Those with a secure attachment tend to be less lonely. In contrast, if our relationship with our parents or caregivers was inconsistent, unstable, or even abusive, we're more prone to distrust future relationships. So early experiences of relationship turmoil or betrayal, they play a role as well. This can lead to insecure attachment, which typically means being overly anxious about relationships, are very hesitant to commit. So either response can lead to loneliness as well. So how does secure attachment impact loneliness? It basically, when you have a secure attachment, you have positive experiences with past relationships. When you're an adult, you seek the relationships out, you trust, and you invest in them. So it feels consistently connected. So loneliness in this case is less likely. When you have insecure attachment, you have negative experiences with past relationships. So in adult relationships, you're avoiding and you're distrusting and you're kind of worried about them. So you don't really feel consistently connected, which makes loneliness more likely. But an insecure attachment style isn't etched in stone. So with time and effort, people can work towards secure attachment and feel less lonely. It's also normal to experience insecure attachment from time to time, even if you had a loving and attentive parent or parents. Now, life circumstances also can be contributing factors to loneliness. For example, relationship loss is very common. It could be the loss of a friendship, a romantic partner, a family member, or the loss of your community. So when those connections to your loved ones or your community are severed, we immediately feel that there's something missing. So because life is really full of loss, we are destined to feel lonely at some point in our lives. It is normal to feel this way. But loneliness can also stem from illness, disability, poverty, having few social connections, and feeling also unfulfilled at work and not appreciated. Other life transitions like retirement or a major move can also play a role. So when we feel lonely, we often think there's something wrong with us. We may even believe that we're not worthy of love and connection. But just as we can change our resistance to loneliness, we can also change how we think about it. So there are different interpretations of loneliness that literally lead to different outcomes for people or for two individuals if you look at how they interpret it. So let's look at the first one. So let's just assume that you move into a new town where you don't know anyone, and after a month of moving, you're feeling very lonely. But there are different interpretations. So the first person might say, or might think, there must be something wrong with me since I'm having trouble making new friends. What's the point of trying since others will just reject me? So that kind of results into feeling sad, hopeless, and self-blaming yourself, which then results in the behavior of withdrawal, isolation, or we ruminate about all this. However, the other person who's also new in town and hasn't found any friends yet, they sort of think to themselves, well, actually, it's normal to feel lonely after moving, so there's nothing wrong with me. I just need more time to make new friends. It may take a while, but I'll get there. So the emotions that come from that type of thinking are hope. That person feels confident, and the person feels like they can persevere, which then results in the behavior of, let's just say, oh, I'm just going to go out and attend an event, or I'm going to go to the park or the beach, and I'll talk to other people. So the first person blames themselves and assumes their loneliness will last forever. On the other hand, the other person blames their circumstances and assumes their loneliness is just temporary. So these different perspectives lead to very different consequences. The first person withdraws or isolates themselves, while the other person feels motivated to take positive action. So this really shows you how your mindset can quite dramatically impact how you feel lonely and how intense it is and how frequent it is. So emotions are more complex than they appear, obviously. So loneliness is not an exception to that. To understand an emotion, we have to grasp the purpose it serves. And when it comes to loneliness, that purpose is to motivate us to seek out meaningful connections. So in this sense, loneliness can be a helpful compass to point us in the direction of companionship and community. So loneliness is really only a problem when it persists for a long time and negatively affects your well-being. So when this happens, it's really important to take action. So a good first step would be to allow yourself to feel lonely without resisting it. So I always say, do not push things away. Acknowledge the feeling, acknowledge the loneliness, but don't stay there. So, because that also prolongs the loneliness by pushing it away if you do that. Other important steps are you got to reject the belief that something's wrong with you. You got to really, as soon as you think that, you're like, no, that's not really true. That's not true. That's not helpful and it's not true. Then, really, you need to take action in improving the quality of your social interactions. And that can seem hard sometimes because if we're new and we're a bit of an introvert, we're like, oh, this is hard. But the thing is, you find your peers, you find them. And if you're just sitting at home and withdrawing, you can't find them. So another big one is that a lot of people are online a lot. So it's really important to prioritize the in-person interactions and not only online ones. That it really encourages that true, authentic connection. And also, that's a good point to be really authentic around others so that you find friends that really resonate with you. So, really, these strategies that I just talked about improve loneliness by basically, looking at deeper connections with others and changing how you think about loneliness and also helping you share with openness and authenticity. I hope you found this helpful. Thanks for listening.